Ha, ha.
Shields and swords, feel the wars, fighting my blood down to the core. Warriors from medieval age, fear the reign of night brigades. Crusades into the room, moving through the temples and tombs. You scared in place, prepare to face Professor Awesome and the minions of doom.
Professor Awesome and the minions of doom. Professor Awesome and the minions of doom. Professor Awesome and the minions of doom. Professor Awesome and the minions of doom. Professor Awesome and the minions of doom.
Hello, minions. Welcome to the Professor Awesome and Minions of Doom podcast. Today I don't have one of the Minions of Doom with me, but I wanted to talk to you about a conversation I had with someone very recently. She was talking to me and said that she was interested in medieval literature, but she wasn't really so interested in it for study. She just thought it was fun to read, and she had read the things that she was assigned when she was in school, but she didn't know where to go next. If she went to the bookstore, things seemed maybe too difficult or too academic, and she didn't know it would be fun or not opaque, something you could just pick up and read for a good time. And so I'm going to today have a segment that I call 1,000-Year Late Book Review. And so I want to recommend a book to you, and the book I want to recommend is called The Saga of the Volsungs, which is 13th century Viking saga, and Volsungs is Volsungs. And if you're watching this on the netcast rather than listening to the podcast, you can see I'm holding up a Penguin edition. You can see it's not very thick. This one is about 145 pages, and frankly, only about half of that is the saga. The rest of it is appendix and introduction and that kind of thing. Okay, so why should I read Saga of the Volsungs? It sounds boring. It has the word saga in it, so number one, that sounds pretty long. Number two, I don't know what a Volsung is. Well, the Volsung is a particular clan, and this is typical of the kind of saga, which will focus on a family, group, or historical hero, or particular leader in some way. And in this particular case, what's interesting in there? Well, you've got dragon slaying, you've got shapeshifting, you've got bewitched meads, you've got the gods coming and intervening in things, you've got people tricking other people in incest, you've got basically 2 or 3 seasons of Game of Thrones all sort of squeezed into 70 some odd pages of material. So it's a lot of fun, it's really interesting. There's stuff in there that's weird and folkloric and creepy and heroic, and basically everything that you might want out of this kind of literature. Now, how should I think about sagas? The word saga, we often use this connected to the idea of an epic. Sometimes we'll use it interchangeably with epic, but actually epic and saga are 2 different genres. They both have to do with long poems. But the truth is, as something lengthy, the Saga of the Volsungs, in the age of the novel, 70 some odd pages of material probably isn't for you considered very long. And in a sense, it kind of traces along this family. So at first you're going to go several generations in a very short period of time, and then you'll look at the hero of the Saga of the Volsungs and sort of the immediate family and the drama that happens there, which is pretty typical of thinking about history in the sagas. In many ways, the sagas act as a kind of history, even if it's legendary, a sense of who am I as a person. And I define myself as a person by being connected to this kind of legendary historical figure, or this legendary historical family that we have. In the same way that we might today in our history say, well, I'm who I am because of these important battles that form the country I live in. Or more recently, I think we have a lot more of what we consider sort of the short-term identity politics, which is say, I consider myself part of this particular group in terms of our 21st century identity politics, so I'm going to anachronistically kind of trace the origins of that group to kind of define who I am and why I am the way I am, and often justify the things about myself I want to justify. So one thing to be prepared for, I think, is that it doesn't act like a novel. There isn't necessarily a single character. It more is about a family. And so this really does focus on Sigurd particularly, Saga of the Volsungs, which I think one of the reasons it's a good entry point to sagas. The other thing about sagas, which I don't think it's off-putting, but a little surprising for first-time readers, is they tend to be very, we call laconic. That is to say, they're not very ornate in terms of description. When stories are revealed or are expressed, you don't get a lot of talk of what the countryside was like, and back and forth between people, or a lot of dialogue. It's very much sort of, so-and-so said that he was going to do this, and then he went and he did that. And so very often, like a character's death or birth, it'll say like, and then so-and-so went forth and killed his enemy, and the enemy did die. And so when you do have an aside, it tends to be, rather than a kind of long contemplation of what has gone on, or a description of the scene, instead you have these little asides that are little poetic asides. And so because of that, sagas are short. They tend to be short by sort of novel standards, but they also reward a very slow reading. They leave a lot to your imagination. And so for a particular kind of reader who would rather sort of imagine in their mind what has taken place, sagas are really wonderful for that. So what happens if I read Saga of the Volsungs and I really fall in love with it and I really love it? What then? What's your next recommendation? Well, I would recommend sort of, if you decide I love these and I want to look at more, I guess pound for pound, I'd recommend the book The Sagas of Icelanders. Sagas of Icelanders. There are various translators in this, and Saga of the Volsungs is not in this book. This only is specifically about Sagas of the Icelanders. I say this not to privilege the Icelanders sagas over the sagas of the other Scandinavian people, but rather the reason I recommend this book is that it's over 700 pages of different sagas, and the last time I checked, it retailed for about $15. And pound for pound, that's a lot of sagas, and they're all pretty good translations. And so if you fall in love with Saga of the Volsungs and you don't know where to go next, I would recommend this is a really good purchase to go with, to kind of get into that world a little bit. And frankly, by the time you're done with Saga of the Icelanders, there are a lot of sort of sagas in there of all the different types of sagas that you would think of. And so you'll have, I think, a much better familiarity than when you return to other sorts of things like the Nibelungenlied and other sorts of texts like that. So anyway, this is my 1,000-year late book review of Saga of the Volsungs. And I hope you'll read it, and I do hope you'll enjoy it.